Good afternoon, all. So now we are moving towards our last lecture. So we have Dr. Kingsu Giri sir, Assistant Professor, Computer Science and Engineering Department, NITTR Kolkata. So it is my privilege to introduce the youngest speaker of the day, Dr. Kingsu Giri sir. So Dr. Giri is an eminent young researcher in the field of applied mathematics and computer scientist. His deep research interests are computational astrophysics, numerical simulations, computational geometry, job scheduling, parallel computing, etc. So he joined NITTR Kolkata in mid 2015. Before that, he worked as a postdoctoral fellow at National uh, Tsinghua University, Taiwan, from 2013 to 15. He received his PhD from SN Bose National Center for Basic Sciences and both MSc and BSc from Viswabharati University. So Dr. Girisar is going to address the gathering on the topic ancient Indian mathematics. So with the long list of his achievements and glory, I would like to invite Dr. Kingsu Girisar to please put light on the topic ancient Indian mathematics. So Dr. Girisar, over to you.
Okay, thank you. Am I audible?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Mondal. So at the beginning, I would like to give my sincere thanks to the organizers, particularly Professor Dev Prasad Misra, to give me such nice opportunity on presenting the topic ancient Indian mathematics here. So now I am sharing my slides, okay? Okay, are you getting my slides?
Yes.
Fine. Okay. So, apart from many Indians like us, beside us, the rest of the world also know the actual fact, and sometimes they proud internally on the significant contribution on ancient Indian mathematics. However, sometimes they don't accept due to some political or other reason or some other reason. That's why in their literature, in their paper, in their writings, so much things are not reflected. As Professor Raju was mentioned nicely in the first half. So unless you don't know the ancient Indian mathematics, the history of mathematics will be incomplete. In this lecture, in this next 40 to 45 minutes, I will try to highlight the significant, positive, and the concrete contributions made by ancient Indian mathematicians. So, chronologically, Indian history has been segregated into three parts that we know, those who already went through in our school history or college history. That is called ancient India. From the prehistoric age, we don't know until this era 500, that means anno 500. And then it's called the Middle Age or say medieval India. From 500, this current era to 1857 until the rule of East Indian Company, then British enters India and they captured India. And of course, the modern India from the British crown, that means from 1857 to nowadays. So in this lecture, I will mainly concentrate on the ancient period, that means from prehistoric to the AD 500. So first, I should deeply mention the timeline. So this is the road. So it starts from the prehistoric age to the current age that we are. So first, around the first significance or first clear evidence of ancient Indian mathematics nicely observed in this Indus Valley civilization. Although no direct evidences are there, no written scripts are there, but there are enough indirect evidences. I will mention a few. That is nearly 5,000 years ago, so at 3000 before Christ. Then that last up to say 1000, the Indus Valley civilization. Then Aryan invaded India. The Indus Valley civilization destroyed, and Aryan starts their kingdom. So that is the called Vedic mathematics era that I will also discuss. And they continue up to nearly 600 before Christ. Then you know the new tradition of mathematics starts, that is called Jaina tradition, or Jain works on mathematics. But unfortunately, for both of the Indus Valley and the Vedic mathematics, there are no direct evidences. So from the indirect evidences, we need to learn it. However, in case of Jaina works on mathematics, there are so many direct evidences, so many scripts. Some are readable, some are not readable, some are not collected properly. However, some evidences are there. So I will mainly focus these three parts: Indus Valley civilization mathematics, Vedic mathematics, and Jain works on mathematics. But since it's a timeline, so I should also mention the Jain works continue up to nearly 500 AD, this era, and the golden period of the mathematics starts. That is the era of say Aryabhatta, Brahmi, Sridhara, Bhaskaracharya, and so many things. Although in my current talk or in my today's talk, I don't have any scope to mention those golden era. Of course, if I get opportunity, maybe somewhere in next talk, I will elaborate it. And of course, I should also but mention it continue up to 14,000 AD, and then from 1400 AD to 1600 AD, the Kerala school of astronomy and mathematics was very popular and eminent in India. That is also a part of medieval India. Apart from that, I should mention one thing: the era of Buddhist. It starts at the same time after the abolition of Aryans. However, Buddhists mainly concentrated on medicines. You know, Charak, Susruto, we have learned so many names. Although a few contributions are there in mathematics, but Buddhists mainly concentrate on medicine. So that's why I will only concentrate on Jain works on mathematics, as well as Vedic and Indus Valley civilization. So this is my roadmap of this talk, these three. So I will stop here. So first I will come Indus Valley civilization. So this is the scenario around 2500 BC. So it's believed that the Indus Valley civilization is the oldest one or biggest one compared to its contemporaries like Egyptian civilization and Mesopotamian civilizations. Now this is the map of Indus Valley civilization. You can see it flourished from 3300 BC to 1700 BC. Mainly, you know, the western part of current India, northwestern part of current India, and completely entire current Pakistan was the part of this Indus Valley civilization. And the peak hour or the peak, it peaked from 2600 to 1900 before Christ. Okay. Now, this civilization was spread over nearly 1 million square kilometers, nearly 10 lakh square kilometers, with say 1,000 settlements. Among them, you know, there are 600 settlements in current India and 400 settlements in Pakistan. Now, the main drawback to learn those Indus Valley civilization mathematics, even the history, is the typical script. Till now, it is yet to understand the script they used. Some works are going on, various scientists, various groups, various archaeologists are working on that till now, but the total thing, it's still not revealed in front of us. The work is going on. But there are very much indirect evidences from that we can find. Like see, their urban layout, you know, at this era, how sophisticated urban layout, although it's a constructed image, but it's like this. It's an Harappan city. As well as, you know, if you see this great bath of Mohenjo-daro now in Pakistan, you can see their precisions, their accuracy. You see, they use these perpendicular roads. So we can, the indirect evidence is telling there is some concept of perpendiculars. Using, these two roads are perpendicular, intersect each other. So there are lots of evidence you can find in literature or some books. So the construction of drainage system, granaries, watertight walls, particularly the dock of Lothal now in Pakistan. So all those things you see are sophisticated architectures, and that is the brainchild of, say, good or engineering or intellectual engineering. So unless mathematics, this kind of sophisticated and intellectual engineering is not possible. So it's clearly from this indirect evidences we can be sure that they had lots of knowledge in mathematics, although we don't have any direct proof or direct script. Now, one interesting thing I would like to mention, the size of bricks they used in this era. So all the bricks are of size, say, 7 centimeter into 14 centimeter into 28 centimeter. If you see the ratio, you see 1:2:4, with height is to width is to length. And also it has been found that they use sun-dried bricks for infill, like the houses or constructions, and burnt bricks for drain and swale linings, their technology. So this is the typical kind of bits that found. So the absolute ratio 4:2:1 was nicely mentioned there. Till now, we use the same ratio, and it is believed that, and it's proved that it's the best optimal bonding for any bricks till today, that they gave nearly 5,000 years ago. They also had clear knowledge, or they adopted the knowledge of lengths, measuring lengths and weights. And the archaeologists already excavated numerous scales and instruments. Some are available in some museums. But unfortunately, since all these excavations were done in British era, or the British, so that's why maybe you will find some things in, say, Oxford Library or Oxford Museum. And this is totally unfortunate for us, like Indians. So, and one interesting thing is that nearly 5,000 plumb bobs and some other weight measurement instruments are uncovered till now. So that is also astonishing for now. Okay, and now they have I already mentioned, they have the uniform system of weights and measures. So if you go through this paper, you will find details here. So they have the unit system with this for the small measurements, like they have the ratios, say 0.05, 0.1, 0.2, 0.5 of this unit of measurement, 2, 5, 10. And for the huge or gigantic measurement, they have the units, say 20, 50, 100, 20, and 500. This kind of evidences, indirect evidences were there that found. And they mainly used it for the trade and the commerce in this Harappan society. In fact, some measures are still there until India adopts the SI units internationally. So now I would like to mention one thing that is called, say, Mohenjo-daro ruler and Indus inch. At that era, they has a standard ruler. I can explain with this picture. So if you see this Indus scale, you will find the Indus scale, there are 9 parallel lines having each of the line with the distance 6.7056 millimeter. And that is called Mohenjo-daro ruler, made by ivory. And the accuracy is so perfect that the mean error is nearly 0.075 millimeter, mainly say 2 to 4% for the true value. It's very small. Even nowadays, once we work on, say, numerical simulations and numerical works, we have 5 to 10% errors, and we need to digest it. And the interesting fact is that the definition of Indus inch. The Indus inch is, there is a hollow dot at the beginning, and after the 6th line, there is a black dot, a solid dot. The distance between this hollow dot and the black dot is 33.54 millimeter. In inch, it's 1.32 inches. That is called 1 Indus inch. That is their unit of length. And interestingly, you know, the traditional gauge, till now, even we also use, although we have a SI systems, centimeter or kilometer, whatever may be, 25 Indus in inch means 1 gauge. And still we use this unit, even after 5,000 years of this Indus civilization. One other evidences were that is called the carving. So in the metal things, so we found, the archaeologists found so many evidences of, say, concentric and intersecting circles and triangles. So these things, if you go to this website, you will find this kind of real images. You can try it. So all the references are there in my talk. You can go through the details later. So this, you know, so from this you can easily predict that they have the concept of concentric circles. Not only that, they have the concept of intersecting circles also. So if you find this pottery, so you will find, you see these are the called intersecting circles. So that was found in a lattice on the surface of jar at Mohenjo-daro. Particularly that is collected from Harappa and that is from Mohenjo-daro. So for the details, you need to go through this paper. If you go to this CIFR website, they have written a nice paper on this, so you can go through it, particularly for the students. So even in this era, they have approximated the concept of pi. How? You know, if you go through this paper, you will find, so the sample number of carts, that means the bullock carts they used. And of course, for each of the bullock carts, you know, there is 2 wheels, and in the wheels, the metallic band wrapped around this ring. So it's clearly points out that they has the knowledge of the ratio of the circumference and the diameter of a circle. Otherwise, they can't prepare this rim accurately, because, you know, ultimately they need to convert this straight line to a circle, to a circular ring. So that's why concept of pi was there. However, no direct evidences was there for the value of pi. That Vedic mathematics and Jain mathematics, we found it. That I will come the next. Now I will come to the Vedic mathematics. So now this is the map of Vedic India. You know, the Aryan invaded India, and ultimately the civilization of Harappa and Mohenjo-daro abolished, and Vedic and the Aryans start their kingdom. So the Aryans adopted almost nothing of Indus. So that is the, actually, what the interesting part is that if you see the cultures, all of the three, say Indus, Vedic, and also Jain, they are mutually exclusive. Even the mathematical development, these are also mutually exclusive. That is the most interesting part. It's not like that Aryans borrowed from the Indus or Jains borrowed from Aryan civilizations. That is very interesting part, as per I learned, although in a very short day. So the word Ar means noble. In Sanskrit, they also use Aryas, that you may know. And the Vedic word comes from the Vedas. And most interestingly, that Professor Raju was telling in the first half, the word Ganito, Bengali we tell Ganit, that is called science of calculation, first appears in Vedic works. And Ganito, you know, all the Indian equivalent of the world mathematics. So we are the beginner. So we should feel proud on that. The main thing or the evidences for this Vedic mathematics are 16 Sulva Sutras. So this gives a major part. So I will discuss few. And you know, for the Vedics, the sacrificial rites like Yajnas were the main feature of Vedic religion. And the Silva Sutra, you know, that is the composition of providing instruction on the principles involved on, say, on Vedis, or that means altars and agnis, fireplaces at the Yajna. So the shape and the shape of the altars, that means Vedis, and also fireplaces, that is Agnis, are different. So from these different shapes, so there is many indirect evidences of so many typical geometrical structures they used even at this Vedic era. That I will come. So the different types of altars and fireplaces were necessary for the different types of ceremony. So these are the variety of shapes we found. So if you go to this website, you will find even in details, you can check it. So like say falcon shapes, Vedis, and say altars like these eagle. Tortoise shapes, Vedis. Chariot wheels is not there. Circular shapes, Vedis. Trough with handle, the picture is not there. And pyre. So these are all the typical geometrical shapes. And the typical size of all those bases along with these fireplaces is nearly 20 to 25 feet. Sometimes for a large gathering or say large occasions, that may be from 50 to 60. For the regular occasions, it may be 20 to 25 feet, and for sometimes 50 to 60 feet with length and width. That means, one common thing is that it's like a square kind of shape. So length and width are more or less same. Maybe small variants were there. And setting up those tiles on those bases, so various shapes of tiles like say squares, triangles, pentagon, etc. So these are the indirect evidences of geometric shapes are known by the Vedics or Vedic mathematicians. So apart from all of the Sulva Sutras, few important Sulva Sutras helps us to reveal the mathematics, ancient mathematics, like say Buddhayana Sulva Sutra, time is there, you can see. Apastamba Sulva Sutra, sorry for my bad pronunciation, because I am not happy with these phrases. I just newly learned it, so that's why. Manava Sulva Sutra and Kattayana Sulva Sutra. And apart from that, this first and fourth one is more important in order to find the evidences for ancient Indian mathematics. And there are no direct written evidence. It transmitted only orally. So that is the main drawback, that we did not reveal so much thing from this Vedic mathematics. And when the first written versions of the Sulva Sutras came up is unclear, so we don't know. The text version first came out by European scholars. They already worked on that in mid 19th century. They tried to reveal from this history or some indirect evidences. So for this, you need to go through all those papers. Particularly, there is a paper, nice paper of Bibhuti Bhushan Datta, who was a professor of Calcutta University, when Syama Prasad Mukherjee was the vice chancellor of Calcutta University, and he was the professor of Rajabazar Science College. So he has a nice book on study on early Hindu geometry, and that was printed in the press of University of Calcutta in 1932. So if you are the beginner, so you can go through this book. It's a very good book. Apart from that, a series of papers and books are written by Satya Prakash and Ram Sarup Sharma. They also studied on that. So the thing that Professor Raju was mentioning, Pythagoras theorem. So we have n number of evidences in Sulva Sutras. How? I will mention. The Buddhayana Sulva Sutra gives the rope. Try to understand this statement. This is not the exact statement, that is the extracted version from the evidences. The rope, which is traced across the diagonal of a square, produces an area double the size of the original shape. So if you just take a rope from this end to this end and take the area of this square will be the double of this original shape. That means what you can see, d square is nothing but a square plus a square. So of course, quote unquote, the popular Pythagoras theorem, this may be a special case of the Pythagoras theorem when the two adjacent sides of a triangle is same, A and A, not A and B. However, in Kattayana Sulva Sutra, it gives more general version. That is the exact Pythagorean theorem that Pythagoras claimed in 800 years ago than these Vedic mathematicians. Although there is no clear evidence of the direct proof of Pythagoras theorem, although the European or the European groups claimed they found the direct proof of this Pythagoras theorem. The rope which is stretched along the length of the diagonal and the rectangle produces an area which vertical and horizontal sides make together. Like you see, the area of this large square is nothing but the area of these squares and this square. So if you see it, I don't have enough time so I can explain properly. So the area of BDEF square, the sum of areas like say this and this, that means BD square is AB square plus AD square. They all the shapes they used only for their altars and Vedis shapes and types, but they had the idea. And if you just take it, the triangle ABD, it's nothing but the Pythagoras theorem that is already given, and Pythagoras is popular. Even he gave the idea 800 years than this Vedic mathematics era. But unfortunately, no concrete proofs are there of this theorem. So we need to digest the Pythagoras theorem. Now values of pi, there is some evidences I can explain you. So all the Silva Sutra contains the method of square of a circle. So I am just explaining. So if I have a say square, I need to find the circle with same area. How? The indirect evidence says that Aryans or Vedic mathematics use these things. The square side will be 13 by 15 ratio of the given circle radius. That means if it is R, then if it is nothing but 13 by 15 into R. So what is the area? Area is 4 into sides. You say the diameter is unit length. Then the length of square side is 13 by 15, and if you take it, it's nothing but pi into 1 into 1. Hence that means pi r square. The same area. Although you know that this value is not so much accurate for the actual pi, but it's a good estimation even in this era. But this is not a good approximation as I mentioned, because you know earlier Babylonians also found much better value than that. However, later in Apastamba Silva Sutras, they just gave the reverse problem. So they have a circle radius r, and then it converted to a square with same area. So in that case, let A is the side and R is the radius. Then what happened? R is nothing but just OE minus OQ, sorry, EQ. So this is OQ. And if you find these calculations, maybe you can try later. It's nothing but A into root 2 by 3 plus 2 by 3. And from this, if you find it, you will find the pi is 3.088, more closer than to the actual value. Now, evidence in Silva Sutras, root 2, how they find? Yes. So they find, so plus see the statement, increase the unit length by its third. So 1 plus 1/3, and this third by its own fourth. So now 1/3 plus 1/3 into 1/4, and then less 1/34 of the 1/3 into 1/4. So this is the vectorial representation. Due to lack of time, I got explained. Of course, you can try to understand. It is very simple nowadays, but that time they already revealed it. So now root 2 is what is this? It's nothing but the value, say 1.414215 of 9 places. Interestingly, you see, if you see the exact value of root 2, it's 1.41421. If you see, the Aryan gave the up to 6 significant figures. So 5 places after the decimal places. It was correct. Impossible. It's just wonder at that era. And the Babylonians used this value root 2 400 years later than Vedic mathematicians. Although they have the same accuracy with 6 significant digits nowadays, but after 400 years later, unfortunately, Babylonians have the evidences, so that they got the credentials, and Aryans had no direct evidences, no scripts So that's why they don't recognize our ancient Indian mathematicians. Now I am coming to Jainas era. That is the last era of this ancient era. Then the golden period starts. That means the era of Aryabhatta and Brahmihira. So you know the Jain era. So there are a number of Jain texts. So we have, so the number of say Prajnapti and Sutras, that is the canonical literature. You know, one good thing is that in Jaina eras we have so many evidences with texts. That is the manuscript called Baksali manuscript. I will come. So we have lots of evidences. So these are the key parts. From these we can find the direct evidences of mathematics, like says Surya Prajnapti, Jammudipa Prajnapti, Stananga Sutra. You see, we know Descartes. That means that for the father of Cartesian coordinate. Even before thousands years ago, you know, the Jain mathematician are already given the Stananga Sutra, same as this coordinate geometry letter. But still, they are actually the tragic heroes. They don't give the we don't give sufficient recognition to them. Uttardhayana Sutra, Bhagavati Sutra, Aniyog Dara Sutra, so everything is there. So these are the evidences. So for this one, there is a script that is written by the founder of Jain, Mahaviracharya, Ganita Sara Samagra. So that has been published on 1912 from erstwhile government of Madras, written by M. Rangacharya. So this book is still in this archive, you can find it. So if you go to this website, Rare Books Society of India, you can find this book. So if you are interested, you can go through. So from this book, you can find the idea of the contributions of Jain mathematics. So now I will tell some eminent mathematician, like you say, Bhadra Bahu. Mainly he has written two books, like one is in astronomy, like commentary on Surya Prajnapti, and one is called Bhadrabahu Samhita. But none of these works are available at present. That is also a very bad thing to us. Umasvati. So although he was not a mathematician, he was a metaphysicist, of course related to mathematics. So he has given so many formulas. And also Siddhasena, he are not known, but he was also a mathematician. Later in the golden era of mathematics, Brahmihir quoted or referred this mathematician Siddhasena in his manuscript. We will find. And Jainas mainly have 10 themes for discussion in mathematics, one by one. Parikarama, that means fundamental operations. Vaivadhara, subject of treatment. Vyavahara, sorry. Rajju, I think Professor Raju already written a book on Rajju, that is the geometry part, very important. Rasi, heap, or the mensuration of solid bodies. Kalas Bharna, fractions. Yavat Tavat, simple equation, maybe it's a linear equation. Varga, quadratic equation. Ghana, cubic equation. Varga, that means square and square, biquadratic equations. And Vikalpa, that is called permutation, mainly combinatorics. The subpart is permutation and combinations. So they already work on these 10 themes. Written evidences are there for each of these things. So now I am coming to their philosophy on thinking. So they believe that the time has no beginning or end. That we also know even in current day. The universe is endless and its life is endless. Still we now tell universe is expanding. They wanted to prove that what their religion says is correct. It's obvious, it's their view. But how to show that? Without evidence, they thought that no, whatever we are telling in the name of religion, that will not accept by the people. So that's why they try to form the mathematical logic in order to prove their religion thoughts that is correct. That means the endless universe endless time and that's one. That's why they goes to the concept of infinity that I am coming, infinite numbers. To prove the infinite nature of time and life and universe, the Jain mathematicians studying mathematics, and they wanted to prove this by mathematical logic so that the wise people, sage people accept it. They will not blindly believe it. That's why they are very sage. But mathematics at that time played with only smaller numbers or finite. That we know it finite numbers nowadays for real life trade or astronomy, whatever may be. And there was no method for catching infinite that exists in mathematics. So that's why they made a simple assumption before going into the work. What is the assumption? To reach the highest place, you first need to go higher, and then even go higher. Only then you can reach infinite. So whatever you think it's even larger than that, that is the current definition of infinity. That is borrowed from their concept. So they started their work for finding huge or large, gigantic numbers. How? I am coming to the next slide. On the next slide. So they thought that this is their God. They are God. And the God travels 1 lakh jajna. Jajna means 10 lakh kilometers. We call today 1 million kilometers in seconds. Suppose the God travels 10 lakh kilometers per second. Now there is a target for God. Then the distance that God traveled within 6 months is called Rajju, the distance unit. And this is equal to nearly 1,552 these kilometers. And actually, this is equal to the distance that traveled by light in 60 days. So can you imagine how huge numbers they already given? So that is called Rajju. Now, I am coming the measuring of huge distance and Rajju. Sorry, the title has been given. No, so this is the measuring huge time, not distances. Okay, so I am coming. So the title is misleading. It should be huge times, not distances. Sorry for this typo. And they take a pot of length, breadth, and depth, say 1 jajana. That means 1 jajana I have already mentioned in the previous slides, 10 lakh kilometers. Now take 1 hair from a sheep every century and put it in the pot. Every century you take 1 hair and just put in the pot. The thing is that the time it will take to fill the pot is called palya. So this would be palya, not Rajju. I have typo is there. I have the same title, palya. And the average, the average 5 centimeter long hair has the volume of this cubic centimeter cube. So the volume of the pot will be like this, and the palya will be like this years, huge times. Okay, that's pretty long time. But if you try to write it, how? That's why now we have 2 formats, scientific format and decimal format. The same concept they already given there. So that's why they were trying for this short format or quote unquote scientific format nowadays. So the Jain solved this problem with creating a new number writing method called index numbers. I will explain how the concept of logarithm was there and at that time. So they started representing the big numbers with the help of small numbers. How? If there is a number, even if you divide the number say by 2 with n number of times, and ultimately you have a remainder 0. Suppose there is a number say 16. If I divide by 2, it's 8. So first time, second time I divide, it's 4. Third time I divide, it's 2, and fourth time I divide, it's 0 remainder. So if you divide 4 times the number 16, it will be 0. That is the concept of ardha-chedo. That means nothing but logarithm with base 2 nowadays. Let us take a number 524288. So if you take 19 times divide, it will be 0. Remainder will be 0. So 19 is called the ardha-ched of this number. That is called logarithm nowadays. They already given 3000 or 500 years ago. Similarly, they also use log 3, like say trikotched and so on. Many evidences are there with this, direct evidences. Now they start the main revolutionary work in this Jain era is the invention or the discovery of infinite number. So how they thought? They already worked with huge time and huge length and solve problem using the short number. Now the problem is that if the number is even bigger than this, the short number method will be failed, the log method will be failed. How they will solve? They come with some conclusions. What is this? They feel devise a method of infinite number, and they proposed take a pot as wide as the earth, start putting and counting mustard seeds in that pot. Fine. When the pot is filled, still you shall not be able to reach the highest number. If you take a pot 1,000 times larger than the pot with the size of earth and do the same thing, still this will be smaller than the highest number that can be. You know, this philosophical thinking even these days. That's why they needed a symbol for quantity that did not stop. Hence, they conclude that the number that is bigger than any big number that human mind can imagine or calculate is called Osima, or in current days we call it infinity or infinite number. Not only that, they also concept of countable and uncountable numbers. Sankhayat, that means countable. Asankhayat, countable but infinite. Anant, endless or not countable. And they ultimately reach to the conclusion that take the biggest number you can imagine, let it be say A. Now, multiple A with A, that means it's A square. Take B is A square. Now do the same to B to get B square. And keep repeating this thing again and again so that you are at the way of infinity. That means the concept of asymptotes or asymptotic concept is already there at their mind. Not maybe in our modern mathematics form, but they already anticipated, they had the ideas. So if you go through this paper, you can find in details for that. Okay. They also have the concept of Vikalpa, that means called permutation and combination, I should explain. So they have the correct formulas of both permutation and combinations you will find. I need to go quickly because you know I don't have enough time. I have so many slides, so I need to finish. They have also concept of permutations. So if you go through this paper, you will find the details work on that. And at that time, they had given the idea of Meru Prastaro, that is nothing but today's Pascal's triangle. So all Europeans are borrowed this concept from Indians. That Professor Raju was mentioning correctly at that time. That concept is our own Indian concept, Pascal's triangle, in this chapter of permutation and combinations and binomial theorem. And they based on the following formula they used it. That is called say recurrence formula in the Pascal's triangle. Now I would like to explain Meru Prastaro by Jain, what they explained. So first draw a square. Okay. Now below it, starting from the middle of the lower side, draw 2 squares. And similarly draw 3 squares and so on, 4 squares and so on. Write the number 1 here and 1 all as this adjacent, that means first and last squares of each of this row. Now you take this as addition of these 2. If you take 3, addition of 2. So that is nothing but the concept of Pascal's triangle they already given earlier. In 17th century, French mathematician Blaise Pascal discovered it. However, he carefully did not mention anything on this Jain's development. So unfortunately, we know it Pascal's triangle, but nobody know on Meru Prastaro. That is our Indian inventions. One of the important things that the direct evidence for this is Bakshali manuscript that was revealed in a summer of 1881 by the villagers in Bakshali, which is a village near Mardan in Pakistan, today's Pakistan. And the works in Bakshali manuscript probably in say from 2000 to 400 AD, and it's written in the birch bark. So this is some samples. If you go to this website of American Mathematical Society, you will find all those images. The notation used have features not found in any other document, so it's exceptional. Maybe this is the part of Chinese works that already they documented, and maybe it's the amalgamation of earlier works, maybe from BC 500 to 200 AD. So these are the samples. You know, there is a mathematician George Rusby-Kaye since this era. Unfortunately, was 1881 is the British era. So they already captured these things. So British mathematician George Rusby-Kaye taken all these images, and he has written a book like in Bakshali manuscript with say Archaeology Survey of India. So if you go through these 4 papers, lots of words are there on that. So this is the recent image of the publicly released by this manuscript held at Bodleian Library in Oxford University. Unfortunately, British captured it, although it's our Indian property, United India property. So the concept of numerals were interesting in Bakshali manuscript, particularly if you see this manuscript, the numbers are revealed there. You see, we found the number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and dot. Be careful, dot is not the jar. In Chinese concept, some unknown things or variable means it's dot. Later, in the golden age, Aryabhatta invented 0 with this dot. So this is the thing, and this is the typical Devanagari script, Sanskrit script 0 to 9. So those who are interested, they may try to image processing with this T2 data, and they can find the similarities with all these numbers, with the Bakshali manuscript and this Devanagari numbers. Okay. So this is the thing. And from this manuscript, you know, this is a sample manuscript. If you read it, some works has been done on it. So you will find a large number, say 265329 ... and it's appearing in this strange way. So this is the thing. I have just zoomed this. I have discarded this one. These things I can explain a little. Don't have enough time. You see, there are 3 parts: yellow, green, and red. Yellow part is clearly visible in the manuscript. Green is partially visible, and red is not visible, but it's anticipated. So what are the features? Number are often written as words, not again in numerals. And towards the top of the sequence of words is found records of single numbers as pair of digits, like say 6 and 20 for 26, 1 less than 30 for 29 in words, not in numbers. Of course, there is no mathematics at all, or maybe you don't know. We need to reveal why this particular number and no other. Where this page comes from, this mystery, that is maybe a topic of research, as it is a collection of miscellaneous things and we did not recover the whole things. Some things are already torn, not collected properly. So that's why the whole mystery are still unsolved. So they also use the fractions. You see, I can give this. So I have a number now. It is 3/4 minus 1/2. In this Bakshali manuscript, they use like this way: 3/4. You said no line appears between the numerator and the denominator. And interestingly, you see the minus sign, they appear with the plus sign. So if you go through this paper of B. Datta and Singh N, B. Datta is very popular for history of Hindu mathematics. Vibhutibhushan Datta was a Bengali mathematician from Calcutta University. So that is the equations, and in the Bakshali manuscript I can explain. You see, this is the equation. Can you guess? If you try to read in our current mathematics, it will be goes like this. You see, dot means unknowns. X plus 5. With this is called coefficient. U means jukta. Means addition, add, juta. Sa means and, simultaneous equations. So all concepts are there. Unknown, simultaneous equations, even all are there. Now you see plus 7 plus, although it's x minus 7. And mu, that means mul, that means roots. So you can easily read it. Actually, it's x plus 5 is y square and x minus 7 is z square. Simultaneous nonlinear equations. The method of equalization is used to many problem solving tasks which occur in the manuscript. And ultimately, this may reduce to the n linear equations with n unknowns. They also give the concept of square root. It's very nice. First, I try to just go through this concept. In the case of non-square number, say it's a 5 or whatever, non-square number. Subtract the nearest square number, 4. Divide the remainder by twice this nearest square, half the square of this divided by the sum of the approximate root and the fraction. I am explaining in the next slide with the example. Please wait. This is subtracted and will give the corrected root. So I can explain some examples. So I need to find root 5. So according to the Jain's rules or Jain's mathematicians, so 4 is the nearest square number 4, that is 2 square. So here a is 2 and q is here 5. So we need to find root q. So root 5 means nothing but root q, that is nothing but 4 plus 1, that means 2 square plus 1. That means you can write it 2 square plus 1, that means 2 plus 1 by 4 by 1 by 4 square dot dot dot. And it is nothing but 2.2366. And if you see this actual value, you see it's correct up to 4 significant figures. And interestingly, this is nothing but the concept of power series that was invented in this modern age. So the concept of power series that are also known to the Jain mathematicians. So it's nothing but 2 square. Once you know to learn the power series, it's nothing but 2 square plus 1 whole to the power half. That is nothing but this series. So ultimately what happened? So after that, maybe we start the medieval part, that is not the part of the topic, that is called the golden era of Indian mathematics. For the classical era, we know the Aryabhatta was there, that he headed a research center in Kusumpura. After that, Barahmir and Ujjaini, then Brahmagupta is there, and then Bhaskara one. So this is the golden era of mathematics. Maybe I don't have any scope to discuss it. Maybe later I can discuss some other talk. Okay. So what is the conclusion of my talk? What I try to intend here? The history of Indian mathematics is a vast topic. Can never be revealed completely, as the works of the ancient times remain either undiscovered or has been lost throughout the time. But still, we should know the reality and we should acknowledge our great ancient Indian mathematicians. So thank you for your attention. Any questions?
Thank you, Dr. Giri. Now we'd like to take a few questions. I can see one hand by Anusri Saha, madam. Anusri Saha, if you are still connected, you may ask your question.